This is TCI's Pro Touring IFS kit for the C10, specifically for this square body. As you can tell, I've already painted a lot of the parts and powder coated a few of them as well. And the shocks, I went with the RideTech Coilover. They offer a RideTech Shockwave airbag system if you choose. Also, I went with the standard brakes that they send. They do, I think, a Willwood upgrade for like another $1,200 or something. But for what we're trying to accomplish with this truck, completely unnecessary. So let's get into it. Step one on this install is to raise the cross member up in place and put the two 1/2-inch bolts and then the two, 7/16 bolts, I believe they are, towards the back. These are the only ones that line up to factory holes. Now we're going to take a transfer punch, mark the rest of the holes that have to have bolts ran through them, and then drill those, and then take everything apart and put everything back together. So this is the stage once you get the bottom bolts in and the reinforcement plates on the inside of the frame. We're going to be putting these coilover mounts and upper control arm mounts on the outside. So, well, 3 pieces of TCI components along with the frame all gets bolted together at once. That was exhausting. There's so many of these bolts in this thing now, and very few of them lined up besides the ones that I had to drill. It took a lot of tweaking and slotting, and like for instance, this hole was not even drilled into the frame. So I had to drill that, but I don't know why they got this so close to the edge. On this side, you can't even put a socket on it. Also, this bracket here was too long and making contact against the frame before you could even line the bolts up with it. So I had to slot those and trim some, and a lot of work. I know they do say to test fit everything before you do paint, powder coat, etc. But I mean, I'm used to slotting a little or doing some clearancing, but this was exhausting. Now that we've got the cross member all bolted up, also I drilled the holes for the sway bar a couple of minutes ago. TCI recommends knocking these center pins out, or these bushings out, and putting some of the energy suspension lubricant inside them, which they provide in this tiny little tube. Can't wash that stuff off your skin in a month of Sundays. You really don't have to wipe it all the way to the top because it'll smear up there when you're installing it in these bushings. Yeah. Probably smear a little bit on the ends of these bushings too, because they're going to be up against metal washers. And you don't want to start driving a squeaky front suspension only to have to disassemble all of it. First step of putting these control arms on is installing these little bushings here. They change sounds real quick when they bottom out. Look at that space. That's not awesome. It shouldn't be near that much. Can't imagine why that's so difficult to go in. except that it fits about like everything else has so far. All right, there's the lower arm. We're gonna leave it pretty loose for now until we get the rest of this stuff done. For the upper control arm, if we start by threading these studs in, coarse side first, I've got blue thread locker on them. I don't know if it recommends red or high strength, but I'm sure blue will be good. That's it. Now I guess TCI has done at least one or two of these and know that starting with 3 of the supplied washers behind the upper control arm should get your alignment somewhere close. And they say to use the rest of the washers on the outside, that way you'll have them if your alignment guy needs to use them as shims. But I found that if you put 3 washers, which is what you'd have left, on the outside, you won't actually get into the nylon of these nuts when you go to tighten them up, and that's not really ideal. Anti-seize. It's everywhere, and it gets everywhere. You see, we just barely made it all the way through the nylon on this one, and less than 1 full thread out of the nylon on the front. Now we can tighten up these upper fasteners. Any chance it's the same size? Hey, it is. Okay, feels like it's snugged up against the bushing in there, so you don't have to worry about it. Now it's time for our shocky shocks. I went with the, I think they're rated 600-pound springs, but I wanted the lightest ones. Ooh, there's oil right there. I hope this thing's not leaking before we ever even use it. Or that's just some assembly residue. That'd be frustrating. Anywho, it says Hyperco on these. I don't know if you guys can see that. But I tend to choose, like I did on the last truck that we did, the Viking coilovers, the lightest springs that they offer, because I am not using them to do any kind of autocross. So I would rather have a much more forgiving ride than that extra firmness. Oh, this is, I have to go in from the back. Yeah. The bolt hits here before it can go in on the front, so it has to go from the back forward. Anyway, and these are adjustable. It says rebound on here, and so counterclockwise all the way, I guess, is the softest, which, does that make it rebound faster or slower? I don't know. Then you got a set screw on this lower collar. It's currently tight, takes an Allen wrench. If you loosen that up and then take all the weight off of your suspension, you can make this ride height adjustment to kind of set where you want this thing to be. The idea is making sure, though, that you leave yourself as much travel as you can on your shock. So if your truck's too heavy and you use the 600-pound springs, it'll compress this so much that you don't have any travel. And that's not good for anyone, except maybe those autocross guys, which, as we have established, I am not. This knuckle is heavy, and I've even taken the caliper off of mine so I can paint it. Now you can't let this all the way down just yet until you start this lower castle nut. It won't fit in there if it's dropped all the way over that ball joint. All right, the top one, just come on down. Get out of my way, Greasy. And it gets a washer, or as these people in Oklahoma say, washer. We're gonna tighten these down to 11 foot-pounds and then put the cotter pins in there. Right. Those of you who aren't new here, you know our love-hate relationship with LMC truck. These brake lines, and I'll show the little label on screen, are one of those rare wins where they were a perfect fit. Both the rear brake line and bracket mount section and these front brake lines with the little fittings here that go through the frame. So, a really nice relief. It's well worth the money. I want to say that the LMC truck kit was about the cheapest thing I found as far as all 3 hoses for one of these in braided stainless. Actually really nice pieces. Like I said, it has the UV coating on it. I don't know, whatever size fitting you call that, you don't really need to know. Because it also comes with the new banjo fittings and washers for these calipers. Looks like it's gonna want it to point up. Not sure how much our brake line's gonna like that. We do? Nah, it's not gonna go any direction but straight up. This is the wrong thread. I guess I spoke too soon. All right, I take back everything I just said. Or maybe this is just a TCI problem that they sent out the calipers that don't fit the factory size brake hoses. I'm sure at some point I'll learn to read through the instructions before assembly, making sure I have everything I need. The guys at TCI said they normally send out their brake line kit with these front ends. It didn't get mentioned to me. So they're gonna do that now. I'm gonna go ahead and have them send me the recommended power steering line connections that they keep in stock. So that'll be on its way as well, because that's the next thing I'll run into a hard stop. I went ahead and put these ends on, even though you're not supposed to until this point. I did center the rack on the bench per the instructions. So we'll get this thing bolted up at least, and we'll just do everything else but the brake lines for now. Starting to worry that we weren't going to be able to get skinny enough to run this alignment. I ran these all the way in as far as they can go on these tie rod ends. We'll raise them up. Alignment maybe just a hair towed in. You can honestly be surprised at how well you can eyeball an alignment on a vehicle. Or at least you can tell yourself that. It's way tighter than I'd like it to be, but I needed that castle nut to go down far enough that this pin could go through. Still doesn't love it. A drawer full of hammers and pliers. And I'm hitting that with a wrench. Onto the sway bar. Another circumstance where I've had to provide my own hardware. What they sent and what they show in the picture are similar, but it was for a different type of control arm. Could thread inside here and then you'd locate it through a hole. It also fits the end of the sway bar, which would be nice. It could ride like that, but then what do you hook here? Anyway, I got 2 of these instead of shoulder bolts, and you can't just use thread right here. It needs to be a shoulder bolt so it doesn't have slack, or the pressure from the resistance of that anti-sway bar doesn't need to be against threads. It needs to be against a shoulder. On these bolts, I put a little blue thread locker on them. There's really nothing that's going to help keep them in. They just bottom out and that's it. Lock washers or anything. I don't think NSC's is the move here, because I don't want this bolt to be easy to come out. Instructions call for more of this energy suspension sticky icky. I'll tell you, there's no chance this stuff's going anywhere. It'll be lubing this bushing when Jesus comes back. Try not to get this all over my freshly powder coated sway bar. I'm sure I will. We get these saddles on here. Interestingly enough, the very first step of these instructions was drilling the frame for this anti-sway bar. And the very last step of this install is installing the anti-sway bar. They were sharp to point out not to drill these holes in line with the frame rails, because the frame rails actually are pointed together towards the front, so they are not parallel from each other. Could cause yourself a little bit of headache. Use this pretty heavy duty bracket on the inside of the frame to back up the sway bar, which tells me they're pretty serious about the performance of that. Had a package from TCI show up in less than a week, so appreciate that. Got that power steering line kit, which we don't need to get into that in this video. That'll be more of an engine install thing. See, it's got a bunch of the fittings. I'm gonna have to cut all these lines. Anyway, also the restrictor valve to run the LS Type 2 pump to the steering rack to reduce the flow rate, I think. This is the brake line kit that they, I guess, typically send with this IFS. So looks like there's some weld-on tabs there. We're gonna try to run it in that factory location and see what happens. I'm pretty sure this will be the same size fitting that we already installed from that factory replacement kit. So we don't need to change any of that out, and I'm not gonna ship that kit back anyway, because whatever. I already used the one for the rear brakes out of that kit. But this is I like this process better, where the banjo just rests. Oh, what? Wait, what? So it's the right size bolt. Off the phone with the guys in California. I guess they make these in 10 millimeter as well as a 7/16, but based on the length of these hoses, they should be the 7/16. But they are not. They were made up wrong at their facility. So overnighting me the correct hoses, I hope. All right, let's try this one more time again. And had the bolts, new bolts and washers taped together. So hopefully that's what we need. That's correct. The length is correct. They do fit in the banjo fittings. You know, I don't love that these don't have that nice coating on it like the cheapy ones that I bought from LMC Truck. Whatever. This is the wrong thread pitch bolt. You gotta be kidding me. Well, I'll tell you, I spent $8,000 or $9,000 on all these suspension components. They gave me the brake lines wrong. And then they gave me another brake line, wrong hardware. I paid $250 for a set of hoses for power steering. But at least when they overnighted these hoses, they sent me a couple of stickers. So that's probably helpful. So I guess we should count our blessings. At least we have enough parts from 2 different shipments to make this work. We got 2 new stickers too. So let's check this kit since they're batting 100. This is $250. It's supposed to be everything I need to connect the factory Type 2 power steering pump. Okay, Sable. To that rack that they sent us. So looks like these are the 2 fittings that go in the rack. They convert it to looks like a 6AN, which are already crimped onto these 2 3/8 hoses. There's a restrictor valve, which you'll unscrew this and put it in its place. And I'm assuming there's 6AN on that side. So we can just connect these preformed lines. Yep. Now, what I don't see is any way to connect to this return barb. So that looks like a 3/8 barb. None of these are gonna work on that. $250 power steering line kit, and I'm still gonna have to buy a fitting to convert a 3/8 barb to 6AN line. By the way, I will be buying a new pump, not just because it's grimy and this hose is a little bit bent, but actually a lot bent. I think that's supposed to point forward. Anyway, things got, I don't know, 150,000 miles on it. It's unknown. They're less than $100, so it's just a smart time to change this out. While waiting around to get the right components to do this steering shaft, somebody went ahead and put this engine and transmission in the truck. Probably impatience won't pay off, but I had a lot of other things that were pending this sitting in the truck. So it's in. What we have is eBay parts. This is a 3/4 inch double D, just, I don't know, a length of rod, 20 something inches long, because I know it's more than we're gonna need. So it'll be a cut to fit. This is 1 inch double D by 3/4 inch double D. So 1 inch will go on the truck and the 3/4 inch will be in this rod. The other thing, we have this double joint, which is the 3/4 inch double D on one end to fit on this rod, and the other is 3/4 by 36, I believe, which is what our Ford rack is. So here's my first mock-up, and it does barely make contact right there with the frame. And of course, since there's a double joint here, you're gonna have to have something to stabilize the shaft, which I have it on the way. It's just this stuff's taking forever to get shipped to me. I guess my fault for ordering it on eBay. But I may, you can see if it's held right there, it's actually not touching anything, which is super tight. But that's what it takes to get that ran. The headers should drop in there, but let's go get one. Oh yeah, plenty of room. Our last eBay part came through. This is our 3/4 inch eyelet, and holy smokes, I'm thinking that's a 3/4 inch bolt base there too. I hate to drill a hole that big in my frame, although one's kind of already started about where it needs to be. So also not even sure there's going to be enough angle to let this thing do its job. I don't think I can bolt that monster in at any kind of an angle. But like everything else so far, it's not gonna be easy, I guess. Well, there's one way to do it, I suppose. That thing is welded in there. and it's still serviceable. You can put the shaft in as long as you allow room for this to telescope. So you can still disassemble it, but it's not gonna be a good time to take that out ever. So it's on there, and it seems to turn buttery smooth. Now, I don't love that this wasn't bolted in, but there was just no way to get that bolted in there. So we're gonna run with it like this. It works fine, and as we tested earlier, the headers will clear. So that makes our entire front suspension finished, and I will have to raise this thing up because it sits crazy low. And I'm already gonna have to get the slosh tubs to let these tires fit up in the fenders. But it still sits lower than I want it to be. But the thing is cool. I'll give you this warning. Be ready to do a little massaging or tolerancing, maybe getting your own washers for certain size bolts. But expect your truck to be low if you're gonna order this stuff. And maybe make sure you get the right brake line dry out of the box. So I appreciate you guys watching. I know this took a while on the video, but there's a lot here to do, so thanks. We'll see you later.